Good evening, everybody. We are so glad to be here with you on this Sunday evening, uh, just relaxing and having some time to decompress
That's right.
and think about the day, be reflective of all that we have been through and have been blessed to experience. And we are glad to be able to share this time with you. And so we have come together just for our conversation that we get to do occasionally. We'd like to share with you. So please tell everybody that we're on the air. We want to share with you. We have multiple social media platforms that are working at the time. We know you're on Facebook Live. Some of you are on Facebook Live, and we're also on the StreamYard. Help me out with all of the ones that we have.
YouTube, we're on YouTube
Thank
Live.
you, YouTube Live. So
Yeah.
join us, join us, join us. We want to hear your voice in the conversation on tonight because it is a very important one, and you all see that I have on my pearls on tonight. And I was telling Pastor, the pearl is significant. There's some symbolism in the pearls, and I was telling him how pearls are formed because y'all know that he doesn't take my word for everything, and so I was explaining to him how the pearl is formed. It's an irritant that when it goes into a specific mollusk, oyster or clam, the irritant makes the mollusk create a coating. And then what emerges over time is this beautiful set of pearls. And so I think about the irritants that we have had over time and how, just over time, creating that pressure, creating that need for change. And what comes out at the end?
Beautiful pearl.
Yeah, see, he's trying to understand now. I'm going to work with him a little bit more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell the truth. What had happened was they made me wait until they could put their pearls on. They will explain to you why in a moment. We're so glad to have you guys with us tonight. What's up, family? We appreciate all of you. I hope that you enjoyed the worship. They're just having a wonderful time at my expense, but it's going to be all right. I'm so excited, man. We had planned to talk about this past election season and all that has happened this weekend. And we have a very special guest with us, Elm Grove's own Sister Reagan Carter.
Yes.
Let's give her a hand. Yay. Sister Carter is I will call her, for lack of a better term, a political person. She teaches political science and public administration at the Southern University.
Political genius.
There you go, genius. Genius. That's it.
Political pearl.
Yes.
She works diligently in our community, especially for the rights of children and women. She's a campaign manager. Man, she knows this stuff in and out. And we're just so grateful that Sister Carter, that you would take time to share with us this evening to enlighten us, right? Because now we have to move forward after the ballots have been counted. And so we appreciate you so much. If you want to give an opening statement or something to our viewers, we certainly appreciate you doing so.
I am so happy to join you all this evening. Being able to talk about things that I'm so passionate about with my pastor and my pastor's wife, who is a pastor herself, is such an amazing honor. In the work that I do, sometimes people forget that, when we work in politics and we work in public health policy, sometimes people forget the passion behind it. And I always want to understand that my passion behind it is rooted in my belief in Jesus Christ. And so it is just wonderful to be here with you all to talk about these two things together.
Thank you so much again for sharing with us and helping us, right? Because we do have to face some runoffs next month. And so we will depend on your expertise as we move forward. Okay, I'm going to do this one time and we're going to get this out of the way so that we can be serious. Tell us about the pearls, please.
I already told you about the pearls.
You told us how they are formed.
You don't believe the
Okay,
truth.
Sister Carter, would you please tell us why you guys are wearing your pearls so we can
I
move
mean,
on?
absolutely. I mean, we wear our pearls often. But however, today is certainly an honor for every member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated to put on our pearls today to honor our sorority sister who is the vice president elect. And so it's always significant to us. It's very significant on today as we honor our new VP elect.
All right, you heard that, Pam Gann? We're moving on. We are moving. Let's talk serious. So, sis, give us an overall, your thoughts on what happened this past weekend.
Oh my gosh. I'll start with the positive for sure. Because there's some deep rooted things that I definitely think that we have to address. But the positive is that majority of our country and record turnout for votes across the country, voter turnout across the country, realized that our country needed a change from the current leadership. Absolutely something to celebrate. It's almost undescribable how I feel when I think about that there is a Black woman who is the vice president elect, who is a graduate of an HBCU, who is a member of the same sorority in which I'm a member. But to have myself and my niece and my friends and my family and everybody to be able to see her on television last night and see someone that looks like us. It's absolutely amazing. When I think about it, of course, I remember when President Obama was elected and how amazing that night was and what that felt like. But I think this election feels so different because of everything we've dealt with over the past 4 years. It feels different because we're in the middle of a pandemic. It feels different because we've been dealing with very dangerous rhetoric and we've been dealing with very blatant racism and sexism. And so it feels very different from the hope that was brought on with the President Obama election. It feels like a sigh of relief with this election.
And I remember making the statement even after President Obama was elected. This is a great victory, and it's very symbolic. But I'm really going to rejoice when we have someone from an HBCU, because Harvard grads do it all the time, and Yale legacies, they're there all the time. But when will we have someone from an HBCU in the White House? And then here we go.
Here we are. Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. I'm sorry, Sister Alicia Price. I forgot to mention you. Shout out. Don't want to miss you either because I got to face you again. Excuse me. So national elections have an effect on the way that we live. But let's talk about closer to home now. One of the things that bothered me is especially the race with Cassidy and Adrian Perkins, which seems to be a repeat, right, of what we see in Louisiana over and over. It's very difficult for Black candidates to get elected statewide. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and what you think we need to do?
So, you bring a very great point. Senator Cassidy has not taken votes and supported bills in the best interest of most of Louisianians. And that's not any secret. Anyone who follows how he votes and look at the issues of Louisiana, he typically does not support what's in the best interest of Louisiana. And so definitely we needed a change in that aspect. I think what happens that's different from in the Republican Party, that's different in the Democratic Party, and we can look at it party or we can look at it race. It's the same, I think it's the same thing. When you look at how the Republican Party make sure that they don't have multiple candidates running against one another to ensure their victory, the Democratic Party or Black candidates sometimes are not as strategic. And that puts us in that situation where we end up losing. There were several Democratic candidates in that Bill Cassidy race that I think were amazing people, several of them. And it was very unfortunate that because it was so many Democratic candidates that we were not even able to get a Democrat in the runoff because our votes were split. And so I think the issue is about us being strategic. I hear within the political realm and conversations that I'm a part of that the Republican Party know years ahead of time who they're putting in races, and they're strategic about it, and they say, okay, this is your year, but this is not your year, and 2024 is your year, but 2020 is not your year. And so they're very strategic. And unfortunately, with Black candidates and in the Democratic Party, we tend not to be that way. And we suffer for it.
Yes.
So there's a comment here. I don't know if you can see it or not. Someone wants you to talk about the lack of DNC backing and money as it relates to our candidates trying to win statewide elections.
So, I mean, I think that that's true. I think that sometimes you have the Democratic Party decides to invest in one candidate over another. We can certainly look at the race aspects of that because, a lot of things do boil down to race. And we cannot deny that. And I think the past 4 years have really demonstrated that to us. But sometimes it also is a matter of we have to get back to, in the Black community, and this is my opinion, and I've seen it be successful, we also have to get back to the point where we're donating to our candidates as well. We cannot always leave it up to the Democratic Party to support our candidates. We have to also support our own candidates within the Black community. President Obama did it with his election, $25 at a time. We know that for our sorority, we had the Divine Nine that was like, just give $19.08 to the Biden-Harris campaign. But locally, we have to begin back to giving those $25 to our candidates. I think back to the days of when I was growing up and was first learning about campaigns, everybody was having a fundraiser for that Black candidate in the community that they wanted to see make a change. We have to get back to those days ourselves because the Democratic Party might not invest in our candidates.
Yeah, that's powerful. You made me think about the days of suppers and so forth.
Absolutely. I almost said it, Pastor, but I didn't want to say it. But the days of the fish fries and the suppers.
That's right. That's right. I remember that, chicken dinners.
Yes. So and we're just talking. So you brought up something about multiple candidates from our communities running against one another. I've kind of coined this term political cannibalism. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be honest with you. That's what I think we saw in our mayor president's race here, where we should not be in a runoff. Can you give us some insight on what you saw there?
Yeah. And so I serve on the board of an organization that's called Emerge Louisiana. And Emerge Louisiana trains Democratic women who are running for office. And that's the requirement, that you have to be a Democrat and you have to be a woman that's interested in running for office. And Emerge exists all across the country. And so with that, I want to make it clear that I believe that anyone who wants to run for political office should be able to do so. Even in my work in managing campaigns, I have never told a candidate that they should or they should not run. But I do believe that we have to be strategic. If the end goal is to have someone that believes the way we believe, supports what we support, and even looks like us to be in those seats. And unfortunately, I think just like what you mentioned with the Senator Cassidy race is the same thing that we saw with the mayor's race. And that is not to say that some people should not have run. That's not my call for sure. But I do know that the numbers, no matter how you look at it, the numbers is only 100% of the vote. No matter how many people are voting, you only have 100%. And to win the race, you only have that 50% plus that one vote. A lot of people don't realize that that's how it's calculated, 50% plus the one vote. And it's very clear in the math. If we did not have so many Democrats in that race, our current mayor president would not be in a runoff. Could we have avoided that with more turnout? Possibly. But could we have avoided that with us being more strategic? Absolutely. And I think that's with every race. And I think that's how the Republican Party tends to beat us out each time, that we're not as strategic as Democrats. We're not as strategic as the Black community and how we decide who is going to run. What begins to be concerning to me is that we also know that Republicans tend to turn out more for runoffs. And so we also have to be aware that, when this race for mayor president in Baton Rouge turns to a runoff in December, that same 48+% that voted for our current mayor, we have to make sure that same 48+% plus more comes out on December 5th. And that's not always easy to get people to come out for a runoff.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you have to be politically correct in addressing this one, but there's another comment in the chat that wants to know. So there's always this talk in our community about our candidates taking money under the table to stay in races that they shouldn't be in. How should we deal with that?
Oh my gosh. I I cannot say that that's not true. Because we hear about it all the time. We hear about it in every race, in our community, races that are not in our community, but we definitely hear about it being that what we would call opposition, paying someone in our community to be in a race. And I just think that, we have to hold people accountable. I think the only way that we can do that is to hold people accountable for their actions. I would hope that we are not still doing that to ourselves. But I hear about it. I can't say that it is or is not true. I can only hope that in our community, we can see how detrimental that would be to us as a people to do that. But we have to hold each other accountable. And so if we hear of that happening, I think the best way to deal with it is, unfortunately, we have to start calling people out on it.
Amen. Amen. You should see the chat box is lighting up.
Yes.
So what say you, family? Put it in the chat box. Should we start calling them out and cutting them off when we find out they're treating us like that? Help us out here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and that for me, that goes with anyone, right? That goes with anyone that we place in leadership. People who are in leadership have to be held accountable. And that's no matter what job we have. If I am the supervisor at McDonald's, I should have to be held accountable. If I am the leader of my own organization, I should be accountable to my board. And so I think that people who are elected officials on the local level, the state level, the federal level, they should be held accountable on a daily basis by the people who put them there.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. So we understand that is again an important race, and we need to keep talking about getting the vote out to the runoff elections. Can you tell me some of the other things that you deem as maybe significant changes in policy or perhaps practice that will occur that came out of this election?
So President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris have already put up their transition website. And one of the things that I was proud to see on their website is that they intend to address racial equity. And so I am really excited to see that that's already up. Number one, to have them put up their website so quickly to stay engaged. I think that it is very important. Of course, the pandemic is also listed. We know how disproportionately the pandemic impacted Black and Brown communities. And so that's extremely important. I think on the local level, a lot of times what people don't realize too, and this goes for your city council races, for your mayor races, and we can pick any city. It doesn't even have to be Baton Rouge that we're talking about. We also have to realize that when we elect people, we elect them for a term. When we're thinking about our city council and our mayor, we elect them for 4 years at a time. And when we see someone doing right and doing great things in their position, I feel that they deserve an opportunity to continue that work. We have to get people. Change doesn't happen overnight. And so, we have to give people an opportunity. And so, the same thing with, President Biden and Vice President Harris coming in. we also have to realize that, they're not going to be able to be sworn in January and the pandemic goes away.
That's right.
So we're going to have to give them time to make those changes and time to do what's possible. I've heard people complain about, the Baton Rouge traffic. We could not have possibly expected any mayor to come in 4 years and all of a sudden Baton Rouge traffic is better. And so we also have to give the Baton Rouge Council time to make those changes. And so when people are doing a great job, I think that they deserve the opportunity to continue to do a great job. And that's also a part of that same level of accountability when people are not doing what we've elected them to do.
Mhm. I know one thing that I am looking forward to see the changes to at the federal level is with the treatment of education, public education.
Yeah.
There have been changes that our current Secretary of Education has made during the year, even during the pandemic, as it relates to funding, that she quickly made sure that the public funding also went to non-public schools, and again done so quickly and such haphazardly that the State Department of Education said, wait a minute, what has come from the federal level doesn't match what is in place at the state level, and we can't really figure out exactly what we're supposed to do now. So I know that I am looking forward to seeing some clarity and consistency among federal and state policy, especially in education.
Absolutely. I think you bring up one of the policy issues that we've been most concerned about in the past 4 years, under the current federal secretary, how she has very haphazardly come in and changed some education policy that has truly, truly impacted our communities. And so to have a first lady that is an educator,
Yes.
also really, really exciting.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have another question for you.
Okay.
Is there anything to address future gerrymandering?
Oh gosh. I know that redistricting is coming up in Louisiana. And I think that we have to be prepared as the people to be able to go to the Capitol and have our say. It's unfortunate that the census was handled in the way that it was by the current leadership, because I also don't think that many in our country, let alone in the Black community, realize how closely tied the census is to funding, how closely tied the census is in redistricting and gerrymandering. And so with the current federal government changing the census date and then changing it again and then changing it again, I think that many people missed opportunities to complete the census, which is unfortunately going to impact us when we look at redistricting. But I absolutely think that we should continue to pay attention to it so that we can have our say, because we deserve to have representatives and senators that mirror the communities in which they serve.
I agree. So there's also a comment about the city council. So can we go district by district as much as you can and tell us what you think about what it looks like for our new city council?
Yes. And so what's very interesting to me about the Metro Council for Baton Rouge, almost every district is in a runoff. There were not many, I think District 5 Councilwoman, well, I know District 5 Councilwoman Erica Green was reelected, which is amazing. Personal privilege. She is a personal friend. And I was really excited about her being reelected. And then Council District 11, I think, was also reelected. And then I'm pretty sure most of the other ones are in a runoff. No, Councilwoman Shauna Banks too.
That's right.
She was reelected. And so you have District 1, which is your Baker Zachary area, is in a runoff. Then you have Councilman Lamont Cole's district that ended up in a runoff. That's District 7. You have District 6 is, I think that's Cleve Dunn and Donna. What's Donna's last name?
I think it's
Don Collins. Don, I'm sorry. It's Don Collins.
Yeah.
Don. They're in a runoff. You have District 10 that's also in a runoff. And so for so many of the Metro Council districts to be in a runoff, that also tells me that the Baton Rouge community was heavily engaged, which is always exciting when you have a community that is heavily engaged in an election. And so I think that there's an opportunity for people in those districts to still have their voices heard, but they have to go back on the runoff. And early voting for the runoff is around the week of Thanksgiving. And so we have to be careful about early voting around the holidays. And then we have to make sure that we show up on election day to make sure that whoever it is, we decide that we want to be reelected. I think for the first time in a very long time for District 1, which is that Zachary Baker area, there is a Black guy that's in that runoff. And so, if you're passionate about the areas in which you live, I encourage you to look at the candidates that are in that runoff and make sure that the candidates that we're voting for align with what it is that we believe in. I think that that's a lot of times what we don't do. We don't do our own research. I think it is amazing that we have so many of the political leaders in our community and across the state who mail us ballots. And they say you should vote this way and you should vote that way. Right. I think that those ballots are very helpful. But I also think that we should not just take a ballot and don't do our own research.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm glad that you said that, because in this past election, I know that there was a ballot that came out, and it had, I think, the name of some Democratic committee, and then Representative Barbara Carpenter put out a Facebook post that said, "Look, that is not official. I don't know who came up with this ballot." So it is very important to do your own research. And I'd like to reiterate, because you made this point earlier, follow the money. Who's putting money behind the candidates? Because I think that says much about their belief system, or at least what they have professed to believe, in order to get the money from particular organizations who may not reflect our interests as a community.
You're exactly right. And campaign finance reports are a public record. For those of us who may not know that, it is public record, your campaign finance reports. Anybody can go to the Louisiana Ethics website and pull up a candidate and look at who donated to their campaign. And we need to do a better job of doing that research. I know that when candidate reports are due, I stay up all night and I'm reading financial reports, and I'm seeing who, like you said, who gave this candidate money. And why did this person give this candidate money? Because people are not donating to campaigns just to throw away money. I don't care if you are a millionaire. You're not donating to campaigns just to throw away money. You have a vested interest in that candidate for some reason. And so you're exactly right. Look at who they're receiving, their campaign finance, who's donating to them.
And again, the Louisiana Ethics website, I want everybody to get that, look that up.
Yes.
And follow the money.
Follow the money. And also, if the person that's running for office is an incumbent and has served in any capacity before, it doesn't even have to be what they're currently running for, then you can still go back and look at how they voted on issues and what their position has been on issues. And I know that there's not a candidate that we're going to 100% agree upon. And I think that we have to be realistic about that there are not candidates that we 100% agree upon. I am blessed to have friends that are in politics all across this state and all over this country. And I can't even tell you that every time they've taken a vote, I have agreed with them. But fundamentally, we have to know that we trust this person in a way that we know that they have our best interests. And we also have to respect that, pulling the lever for yes, no's on those votes, they have a lot of things that they take into consideration. But I like to always say, one thing that I cannot ever, allow you to take into consideration is my freedom. And so those things are not negotiable. But, disagreeing on whether or not we should increase property tax, well, I might be okay with disagreeing on that. But disagreeing on whether or not, I should have my rights as a woman, then I'm not, we can't disagree on that. Disagreeing on about racism, we can't disagree on those things. But we have to be aware that outside of those issues that are purely about humanity, we're not going to 100% agree with all of our candidates. And so sometimes we are choosing the best over what may be the worst, but that doesn't mean that we don't go in the ballot box and select someone.
Correct. And I think that you stated it earlier. It's about holding people accountable.
Absolutely.
So even when you selected the best of what's there, or based on the information that I know this is the best candidate, when something doesn't align with your core values, tell them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Send them an email, call their office.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, family. Early voting is November 20 through 28. November 20 through 28. And the runoff election is on December 5th. So let's make sure that we are early and we are participating.
And round numbers.
Yes.
We're going to have questions about amendments.
You're right.
So we have several members who are stating about amendments. One, Sister Liviette Matthews is saying that she thinks the amendment should be written in simpler language. And, I consider myself maybe not politically astute, but at least politically aware. And it was maybe 2 weeks prior to the election when I realized that there were 7 amendments on the ballot that I had not heard about. And then I had to hurry and go do research. And then the language, as so many of ours are saying, is convoluted and I believe it's intentional. Don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but you cannot walk into the ballot box, on election day, or at least I cannot, and comprehend and make intelligent, critical decisions about all of these things that may change how we function every day. Can you speak to amendments and so forth?
Yes. And so the first thing I will say is when you have that many amendments, and particularly with this election, I know many of my friends and colleagues talked about how when they went into the voting booth this election, the 3-minute time was invoked on many people. And so when you have 7 constitutional amendments and you have a presidential election and Senate and mayor and council, that alone is going to take your 3 minutes.
That's right.
And so going into the voting booth and knowing exactly how you're going to vote already is so extremely important. And so you're right, to know what's those constitutional amendments is extremely important. I wish that there was a way for us to do a huge voter outreach every time we have constitutional amendments, because I think 2 things happen. I think people go in and you tend to be a person who just selects yes, or you tend to be a person who just selects no, or you tend to be a person who doesn't know what the amendments are, and so you don't vote on them at all. And you're not voting on them at all, I think people need to understand is still a vote.
That's right. That's
Wow.
right.
It's absolutely still a vote, because whatever side you're going to be impacted on, you not voting for that side is still a vote for the other side.
That's right. Somebody's making that decision for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so what happens on the legislative level when these bills are passed to decide to send something to what we call a ballot initiative and place those things on the ballot, there is also conversation about how those things are going to be worded. And so we have to be involved at the very beginning
Yes.
of the legislative process when things are decided and voted on, so we can also understand the language that's going to be used when they're placed on the ballot for us as voters to vote on those issues. But it starts very early on during the legislative session on how that language is going to be used. So once it gets on that ballot, that conversation is many times months or even a year old. The discussion around that constitutional amendment number 1, that came from 2019.
Mm. Mhm.
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 Yeah, that came from 2019 legislative session.
I knew that I relied on, I think it's the Political Action Research Committee.
Yes, PAR.
Yeah, okay, that puts out the amendment and then tells you this is what your yes vote means, this is what your no vote means.
Yeah.
And so I found that to be a helpful resource. Some of our members are saying to download the Go Vote application, and you can go to the Secretary of State office or the website for the Secretary of State's office to actually print out your ballot ahead of time. But it is important to do your homework. You cannot wait until election day and go in there and figure out what this means and how it impacts me from both
Right.
sides.
Yeah,
Right.
some were saying that they believe that this is done intentionally to discourage people.
And an interesting statement I read here, somebody related it to the literacy test or
Right.
the poll tax.
Poll
It's the
tax.
equivalent
Right.
to
Right.
the poll tax.
Yes. Yes. And so I unfortunately do think some things are intentionally. I think that voter suppression looks a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And we have to realize that voter suppression looks a lot of different ways. Voter suppression is not always about you changing my polling location. Sometimes voter suppression is you placing something on a ballot and I don't know what it means.
Mhm.
And so I think that sometimes those things are but I also believe that we have to do our own due diligence. When we know that something is intentional, then we should be even more intentional about what it is that we need to do on our side.
And so how do we educate ourselves better as it relates? Because earlier conversation with you, I know you were really passionate about a couple of those amendments.
Yes.
How do we educate ourselves better as it relates to that? And please feel free to talk about the ones that you were really passionate about.
Yes, certainly. So I think that there are several ways that we can educate ourselves. I think one of the things that we can certainly do is on the Secretary of State's website before every election, you can go and click on and view your ballot. And it's usually in red at the top of the website where you view your ballot, you put in your voter information, your name, your birth date, and what is going to be on your specific ballot comes up. And so you can print that out and then you can begin to do your research. You can also rely on the organizations who that's what they do. You mentioned PAR. They are a great resource and they always have education on what's happening with the ballots. They will tell you what's a yes vote, what's a no vote. The Louisiana Budget Project is also a great organization who does the same thing. And then this year, PAR partnered with Louisiana Primary Care Association, which is the organization that I work for, and the Louisiana Public Health Institute. And we actually looked at every one of the amendments and then talked about how those amendments impact health. And so I think that a part of it is just for us to do our own research and look at what does this mean. They're often talked about right before elections in the media, in the news. As I mentioned, we have trusted elected officials who will send out ballots, who will give their suggestions. But you also should do your own research and figure out what those things actually mean for yourself. Pastor, the amendment that I was very passionate about that you and I talked about was Amendment 1, that many people started calling and texting me after the vote started to come in that they did not understand what Amendment 1 was about. And I know that there were groups and organizations that were on the ground that was trying to educate communities and women in our state on that amendment, but it was also worded very confusing in a way that people did not understand. I remember reading a very passionate post from a guy that I don't know. I just happened to read his post where he was apologizing to women, saying that he thought that he was voting for women to be able to keep our rights to make choices and didn't realize that he was voting against that. And so the idea that was even on the ballot, I think is a discussion that will be even lengthier than the amount of time that we have today.
Yeah.
But I was very passionate about it, and I get that reproductive rights is a sensitive issue. I get that a lot of times in the church it's a sensitive issue,
Mhm.
but for me, it's very plain and simple that it is not my decision or no one else's decision what a woman decides with what's going on in her life and with her body. And people can take that any way they want to. They can try to put it up against as many scriptures as they want to, but I put it up against the one about, it's not my place to judge. It's my place to be compassionate. I believe that the God in which we serve is compassionate. And I don't think that women are out here making those types of decisions easily. And I think that people deserve that right to be able to make the decisions that's best for them and their families. And the idea that in 2020 in Louisiana, we were voting on whether or not women have that right is just ridiculous.
And I think that's one thing that we have to learn. We have to respect each other's decisions.
Absolutely.
Right? We have to respect each other's choices. One amendment that I became particularly interested in, and I think it was Amendment number 5, that had to do with fund. Well, I started funding for schools. Ultimately, it goes back to funding for schools. Education is my passion.
Yeah.
And so it was whether there would be a set, I think, percentage that businesses and industry
Oh, yes.
would pay versus just this gift amount, I think was how I read it.
Mhm.
And then simply as a person who deals with school funding and budgets, my first question was, where is the consistency? If you can give me a gift of how much you think you want me to have,
Right.
on a particular for any particular fiscal year, how do I budget consistently? How do I plan what I give my students every
Right.
year on that? So I thought I saw one sign that said stop the corporate welfare. And that's kind of the way I saw it. If
Yeah.
there is not a consistent basis for how what you're going to contribute to the community, to the state, how can then those entities that are dependent on that funding, how do we operate? So
Right.
I thought that's a very interesting
Sure.
and it wasn't worded even that plainly to me.
Yeah.
It took
That
the
was
research.
to erase the ITEP
Yes.
that went in place before. That was just the business industry doing what they do to try to
Yeah.
kill us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So sis,
Constitutional. I'm just going to say, in the constitutional amendments, I think that Louisiana is probably one of very few states who change the state's constitution as often as we do in Louisiana.
hmm,
If we think about it, there is a lot of times we go to the ballot box and there is a constitutional amendment. And I think that we have to realize as a people that when we're voting, when those things are on the ballot, we are changing the constitution of Louisiana. And I would like to see some way that we can even begin to limit that. So often we're changing the Constitution of Louisiana in a way that's more harmful to people than it is. It's always that it seems to be that we're putting things in the Louisiana Constitution that is taking away something from people rather than giving people something.
Right.
yes, indeed. So sis, what do we do with our family members, friends, the people we know who are going to tell us that voting in December is not worth it? That they voted in November, that's enough.
I would like to say that I grow exhausted from those conversations. Because I'm going to be honest, it's a mindset that I struggle to understand. And I struggle to understand it because my parents grew up during segregation. And so I I have heard what that's like. My grandparents didn't always have the right to vote. And I don't take any of those things lightly. And so I do struggle to understand that mindset. But I do have compassion for people who feel like that voting does not impact them. And so I think that that's where we have to start. We have to begin to show people where voting has impacted something that they care about. Because I do know that I would like to think that we're not a selfish people, but sometimes we are a selfish people, and sometimes when we don't think that something is going to impact my house, I don't necessarily feel as strongly about it. And so I have spent a lot of times trying to find in those conversations something that can directly connect with whatever it is that that person is going through and show them how voting has impacted that.
Yes.
And so I think that we have to be a little bit more patient in those conversations. We just can't say, especially to a younger generation who doesn't even understand even what I just said about segregation and my grandparents. And, we have to begin to start where they are and get them to see. And so when I'm talking to my students in my policy class about voting, I always try to get them to see that they complain about things on campus and financial aid. And a lot of those things are decided at the Capitol with who they vote for. And so voting is important for that reason. And so, always try to get someone to make the connection with how voting impacts them. And I think, you all started the conversation off with talking about how we have things on the federal level, but sometimes we forget about things on the local level. Well, what's happening, on December 5th in Baton Rouge is going to impact us first before anything that happens on the federal level. And so we have to be invested in who sits on that council. Because we also have to realize that, when we're hopeful that Mayor Broome wins her reelection, if we don't go out and vote for council members that's going to support her, then we've also not done her a great justice in reelecting her. And so we have to begin to look at, what we call voting down the entire ballot. Vote down your ballot. Everything that's on your ballot from the top to the bottom, you have to have a voice and vote for it.
Any closing statements, John?
Well, I want to thank my sister.
Thank you
for her insight and for her critical thought into the political process and our privilege and right to vote and the importance of exercising it. I want all of our friends and family who joined us live, who will join us later, to please share this information. Do not keep it to yourself, but share it with others such that we can continue to be informed and continue to be excited and invigorated to do our part. And certainly everybody has a part to play in the political process, and it starts with being informed.
Yes, indeed. Give us some great advice before we go, sis.
Oh, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you all this evening. I feel like we could have gone on and on and on, so we definitely have to do it again. I think that we have to be bold in our mission in this world, and people need to recognize that voting is a right, but it is also a privilege. And it is a privilege that we have not always had in the Black community. And we should take that right and take that privilege and use our voice. It's literally where our voice starts. And so I always say, if the polls are open, we need to be going vote.
That's right.
I don't care what's on the ballot. If the polls are open, as a community, as a people, we need to go vote.
That's right.
Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you sharing with us and opening our hearts and our minds, even more so to our responsibility as a faith community to be a part. Shout out to the New Canaan and Elm Grove families. Share this information with everybody who will listen. And let's see, when you see our church member, give her a shout out too. Let people know
Yes.
that she is a smart woman
Yes.
and full of wisdom and knowledge. Thank you again.
Remember
Thank
early
you.
voting dates again,
Yeah.
November 20th through the 28th. November 20th through the 28th. December 5th is the last day to vote. Sorry.
Yes,
So
indeed.
let's get started early, November 20th through the 28th.
Yeah, plenty of thank yous in the chat box. I think you helped a lot of people tonight.
Awesome.
Really appreciate you.
Awesome. And also, just one more thing before we go. If people are interested in voting by mail, then they need to also check with the Secretary of State's office to see about if they can request their mail-in ballots for December 5th as well. You could have done both at the same time for November election, but if some people are still interested in that, then please go to the Secretaries of State's website right now and check to see about getting your ballot by mail.
Thank you. And I would even suggest those of us who help our elderly vote to do that on behalf of our elderly who are not going to deal with the internet. Thank you again, sis. We'll talk soon, probably right after the December 5th election. So
Looking forward to
what for our community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate every one of you. Have a great evening. Peace.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.